All right, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about real property. So real property is anything that's associated with land. So it's the soil, it's the thing above and below the land. So on the board in class, I drew, kind of this picture of here's the land, here's all the way down to the center of the earth, here's up into the atmosphere. In legal theory, all of that is covered by real property. So if you were in law school, you'd look at cases all about, was my use of the land infringed upon because I didn't have access to light, or I had a really noxious smell and things like that. So I also probably talked about the cartoon Up in class because that's a really great example as well of his house had been there in the country. They renovated it and then the city grew out around them. And those skyscrapers that were going in basically were interfering with his right to the light and to sunshine. And so in legal theory, he could have actually sued for that. So just remember that land is more than just the surface. It's things that are below it and above it. And all of that becomes really important when we're trying to decide legal rights. The other thing to keep in mind, and in class I would have grabbed a bundle of markers and had them all in my hand, because the rights to real estate are really what we call a bundle of rights. And so we can break those apart and give those to different people. And that's what an easement is. An easement is one of those bundles of rights. And so when I give someone an easement to my land, what I'm doing is I'm giving them the legal right to access a part of my land. They don't own the land, but they now own the right to access a piece of it. So it's that right to use a portion. And in class, I would have drawn on the board for you an example of a subservient and a dominant estate. I drew kind of a square and then drew a line in the middle and said that parcel A can't access the road. They have to go through parcel B. So B is serving the dominant estate. So hopefully you were in class and that makes sense because I don't really have a way to draw for you on this. But if for some reason that's still unclear, just let me know. All right, so with an easement, it can be created by agreement of the parties. It can be created by implication, which just means that the parties have allowed, like A has allowed B to go across their land without any formal contract or agreement. Now, remember, because of statute of frauds, if you have an agreement, what does it need to be in? Needs to be in writing because this is related to land. And then easement by prescription is the idea that in Indiana, over the course of 20 years, someone has used another person's land in a way that is hostile to that owner's property rights. And it's been notorious, meaning that anybody driving by could see that the land was being used by somebody. And it's continuous for that 20 years. Then the easement is created basically by use. And so the owner then can't come along in year 21 and say, wait, you can't use this, because their lack of concern or lack of stopping it earlier basically creates the easement. Okay, and it can be terminated by agreement, by the two parties just agreeing there's no purpose to the easement anymore. It can be abandoned by the party that has been using the land. The easiest way really is to think of it as like a driveway. You have a driveway on somebody else's land. It's your easement of use. Another example would be utilities. Utilities always have an easement onto your property to get to your house. And so that's going to be something that the railroad easements, a lot of them have been abandoned because the railroads no longer are using those lines. So that might help. Okay, so another right that you have in property is to what we call a profit. So the best way to think of this is you're taking part of the land, so it could be the soil, it could be minerals, it could be produce. So if you are cash renting a farmer's field or a landowner's field, the profit is the crop. The profit is the corn, the soybeans, the wheat. For the soil, there's a couple of farms along Veterans Memorial Parkway, right near where I live, where they're actually sod. So that's really, it's kind of a combination of soil and produce because the sod, the grass, is produce, but with the sod, they're actually taking part of the dirt. And so that would be a profit. Minerals would be taking things like oil, gold, precious metals, any kind of chemical or mineral that's coming out of the ground. So the way to think of it is with a profit, the landowner is giving up a part of their soil, or they're growing a crop. And so they're profiting from the land. All right, so then there's a license. The easiest way to think of this is imagine there was going to be an event down at the amphitheater, and I'm blanking on the name right now, but here on campus there's that little amphitheater off on the northwest corner right before you get to the airport road, and Slater Hill. So let's say that there was going to be a concert at Slater Hill. That amphitheater is owned by Purdue. And if they were going to do a ticketed event, that ticket is your license to be there for a particular show at a particular time. Elliott Hall, I don't know if you've gone to some of the events there, we like to go to off-Broadway shows. We were there for the Bushes in the White House. We had a ticket. That's what allows us to sit in a particular seat. When you go to the movie theater, you get a license to be in a theater at a particular time. So the license is it's personal to you, and there's been a lot of controversy related to sports teams and whether or not the tickets can be resold on the private market. And one of the arguments is it's a personal license to the purchaser of that ticket. And so the football team or the basketball team can restrict the resale rights because it's a personal ticket to a specific individual. Then a lien is a little bit different, because with a lien, what you're doing is when we got our basement finished, we were paying cash as it was being done. But let's say we had some outstanding bills, like we hadn't paid the HVAC people, so the heating and air conditioning, and they want to get paid, but we refuse. So one of the things they can do is they can file what we call a lien against the property, so that I can't sell my house without paying them. Their right to payment will continue with the house because they provided goods and services for the house, which is attached to the real estate. Another example of this would be a tax lien. So if you fail to pay your property tax or your income tax, the government can attach a lien to the property, and then they can actually sell it at a tax sale if you fail to pay. Okay, let's see. Then we have fixtures. So in class, I would have marched up to the desk and I would have actually kind of rocked back and forth on the desk trying to move it. And in your classroom, I can't move it because it is bolted into the floor. So the question becomes whether or not that's a fixture. Fixtures, let me back up just a second. We have furniture, and then we have fixtures. Furniture is very movable. So while my parents were here over the weekend, we did a whole lot of moving furniture around. My parents are project people, which can be really great because it means we knock out some projects really fast while they're here. But we weren't dealing with fixtures. So those desks that are bolted into the ground are probably a fixture. It's debatable because you can move them without damaging the floor, probably. A more practical example of this is, let's say you're looking at a house to purchase and you notice there's a chandelier and it's gorgeous. It's hanging down from the 2-story entry, ornate, gorgeous, and you go, that's part of the house. Well, the homeowner might be saying, no, I'm taking it with me. And so the question then becomes, is it a fixture or not? So if you walk into a house and you're like, I really, really want this, you need to put it on the purchase order that you want to purchase that item with the house. In a kitchen, the dishwasher might be considered a fixture because it's bolted into the countertop, but usually a refrigerator, a stove, washers and dryers are not going to be considered fixtures because they're only attached to the structure basically by the plug. And so that's very easy to remove, and then you remove the washer, the dryer, the refrigerator. Okay. Trade fixtures are just the idea that when you go into a store, like the bookshelves, the counter, those might be considered trade fixtures because they could be difficult to remove. So how do we own property? This is kind of a duplicate of what you saw in chapter 20, but that was related to personal property. So I want to draw that connection so you can see the same terms are being used, but now it's referenced to the real estate. So fee simple just means I own everything. So my house is a fee simple estate. I own all the land, I own the house, there are no restrictions or limitations. Life estate means that I own something for the life of another person. Usually it's going to be someone else. So my grandma has lived on the family farm until literally they moved her a couple of weeks ago into an apartment in town. She's amazing. She's like 92 and a half and had been living on the farm by herself for the last 7 years. And so she just sold the farmland. And they were basically going to let her stay in the house for as long as she wanted. That would be a life estate. She no longer owned the home, but she was able to stay there for a measuring life, which was, in that case, her life. We, as her heirs, would not be able then to use the house once she was gone because it's measured against her life. A future interest would be, let's say, Grandma got to use the house for her life, and then my children got to use it when she died. They have a future interest, or what we would call a remainder interest, after the life estate is over. So when the life estate ends because of someone's death, then the future interest kicks in. I had entire classes just on this. So you can be really glad again that you're not in law school, or if you're like, ooh, this is really interesting, then you should think about law school. Okay, so now we're moving into what duties or obligations does the landowner owe to people who come to visit. So this is where negligence starts to intersect with real property. And there are 3 basic levels of obligation. So let's look at those. So first, there are trespassers. So trespassers are people who have no permission to be on your land or in your home, but they're there anyway. In that situation, you don't have a duty to warn them of dangers, unless they are small children. Then we have the attractive nuisance doctrine that says if it's something that would attract a small child onto your property, then you need to take steps to protect them. So basically, we're saying that children don't have the legal ability or the mental ability to make decisions that, oh, we don't own this, so I shouldn't go there. So think about someone's got a pool on their property. Children and pools it's like this magnetic attraction. Children just want to be near them most of the time. So if I had a pool at my home and I didn't have a fence, the pool's an attractive nuisance, and I need to do something to protect children from coming onto my property. So for example, in Lafayette, you have to have a fence all the way around the pool. In Tippecanoe County, though, you only have to have basically a screen. So a fence on 2 sides, but it doesn't have to be all the way around. So that's not going to protect you under the attractive nuisance doctrine. But maybe you have a cover that's designed to support people. Like, I'm not sure exactly what they call them, but they're like walk across covers. In that situation, you are providing some protection. And so that might work to protect you from negligence liability. Now with licensees, remember someone with a license they're coming onto your premise with permission. And so that's like the movie theater, Elliott Hall, the amphitheater. Then you have to warn people of non-obvious dangers. So if it's icy, like really soon it could start icing here at Purdue, and we always joke that they have the machines that are polishing the ice rather than protecting us from the ice. So in those situations, they might need to warn about the non-obvious danger of ice. Or let's say there's a hole or something where someone could get hurt. So with licensees, you owe a duty to tell them about non-obvious dangers. And then there's invitees. And here the owner owes a duty to take reasonable steps to discover danger and warn or fix it. So invitees, think Walmart, think Target, think any of those businesses that exist for people to come into the business. In that situation, basically everybody's invited. And so that's why Walmart, Target, Payless, stores like that have to put up a sign. If someone drops a jar of spaghetti sauce, they have to be on the lookout for things like that, clean it up, put up the sign that says this is slippery, and warn you of those dangers. They have to take reasonable steps to discover. And so those are kinds of the levels of obligation. I'm going to stop here because we're at 15 minutes. There's a little bit more in this chapter, but I'm going to break it up. This part that we've just gone over is the core of the chapter as far as I'm concerned. There's a little bit more that I'll go over in a moment, but this is the meat of the chapter.